Welcome back to AV Veterans Talk. We're continuing our conversation with this week's guest, John Roth. So we're talking about you and your legacy there out at Edwards Air Force Base. And, you know, your father, where'd your father hail from? What part of the country?
Kansas.
Kansas.
The Kansas farm boy.
Flatlander. And grew up obviously through the Depression, things like that. So World War II happened, and how did he was a World War II pilot. What was his journey to becoming a pilot?
He was actually drafted, was an enlistee, went through the airframe and power plant school in Illinois, and was liked so much they kept him there as an instructor. And then he got word of the aviation cadet program, applied for it, and became a pilot.
Nice.
So he was drafted in September of 42, and then by December of 43, he was in Papua New Guinea, or Dubadora, New Guinea, flying a P-38 Lightning.
Right. He's part of the 80th Fighter Group.
Right.
It's a Headhunters.
And his first combat mission was December 31st to the island of Rabaul. That's a heck of a way to get your feet wet.
Yeah, it was. And flew combat and actually had 2 victories, I believe.
Dad had 2 confirmed kills. He flew from December 43 all the way up through New Guinea, through the islands, up to the Philippines, and it was May of 45 when he was released to come home after 132 combat missions.
Wow. Yeah. It's kind of neat because you think of the nostalgia aspect of your dad, and the one thing I can see is the picture of him standing next to his P-38 and his nose art that they always put on their airplane, and his nose art was?
Dopey with a slingshot. It wasn't a naked lady.
That's right. So he went the Disney route.
Oh, yeah.
So that's pretty. You couldn't do that today because there'd be too much copyright.
Well, you know, the original patch for the 80th was Donald Duck from Disney. And then when they got into New Guinea and the headhunters, the tribe, the people were headhunters, were bringing American pilots out of the jungle. They opted to change their logo to what you see today, the headhunter.
Right.
And that's when that all got changed.
Yeah. And so he had a successful career down there and came back stateside. And his transition from combat pilot to test flying out at Muroc at the time, correct? So what was that like? Dad
was considered a very good pilot, and I think that's why he got sent to Edwards and progressed his way up through. I have some paperwork where he was actually the assistant director of flight research, worked for Colonel Sid Smith, but progressed through that, and then Republic, Carl Bellinger, who was running Republic at the time, was so impressed with Dad's flying from when he would fly chase on the Republic F-84 that they pursued him heavily until I guess they made him an offer dollar-wise that you couldn't refuse.
Right, yeah.
So he went over and started flying for them, doing F-84 work, and then he flew the XF-91, setting that speed record in December of 52. And then he was the chief pilot. He became the chief pilot for the company when Carl went in as the director and was assigned the F-105 program. So he did all the groundwork on the F-105.
Yeah. That time period was, you had the Bud Andersons.
Oh, yeah.
Cardenas. Cardenas was actually, I didn't realize how much involvement he had with Republic also.
Oh, yeah. Bob Cardenas was an unbelievable man. Not only was the manager for the XS1, he was also the flying wing, the YB-49 manager.
Right.
And he was just a neat little guy. I remember meeting him several times.
Yeah, he's one of the few left that are of that generation that are still hanging in there. And he was the YB-49, the flying wing program. He was the one that actually flew it in Washington,
He's
D.C.
the one that flew it down Pennsylvania Avenue over the Capitol.
Absolutely.
Right.
And met with Truman. Was it Truman?
49, it'd have to be about that time, Truman.
Right. and gave Truman the bad news that when Truman says we should have a whole fleet of these, and Bob said, no, you don't.
Oh, I know, he was unstable as could be at the time.
Yeah, and that the pilots that would of that time period wouldn't be able to, unless you were the test pilot mentality, they would be falling out of the sky left and right.
I actually have a copy of the orders issued from Wright Field, because it wasn't Wright-Patterson at the time,
Correct.
it was Wright Field and Patterson Field,
Mm-hmm.
Authorizing my father to fly the wing.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have a copy of the orders.
Yeah.
And then I have a certificate that was given to him by John Northrop, making him a lifetime member of the Flying Wing Club.
Right. Yeah. You're going back to your dad now. During that time period, the 105, very the requirement now to deliver nuclear payloads.
Right.
And that airplane was basically built to deliver a nuclear payload, correct?
The airplane has a bomb bay, was designed to medium altitude, 12 to 20,000 feet at Mach 2 to deliver the nuke.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And out at Edwards Air Force Base, you said he flew it the very first time,
October 22nd, 1955 was first flight.
and it went supersonic on that flight.
1.4, 1.5
Right.
on the first flight.
Yeah. So, anyway, when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about the ruckus lifestyle of the test pilot at Muroc, and is the son overseeing the fun and folly of what's going on out there. So we'll talk about that when we get back. So we'll go to break, and we'll pick it up after that.